November, uniform. November, uniform. November, uniform. November, uniform. Es folgen Mitteilungen für 264. 264. 56 Gruppen. 599.
Welkom bij een lunchmeeting, de eerste van dit kwartaal, samen georganiseerd met Steven King-Haven. Ik zie dat de meeste van jullie al is. Stopt er een stuk in. Peter Staal die komt een lunchmeeting geven over stations. Nou, hij is daar de expert in, misschien eigenlijk niet. Dus daar het hier maar eigenlijk een beetje bij. Ik geef het woord aan Peter Staal.
Oké, dankjewel. Nou.
Ja, ik moet even één ding zeggen. Je moet, omdat er het geluid stoort, dat is ook zo fijn in deze nieuwe hippe zaal. Dus je moet even op het geluid even aanzetten.
Oh, ik moet het geluid nog aanzetten. Oh, dat is niet zo.
Als we hier. Want als het goed is, ja.
Ik hoor het. Oh. Nou komen we dit niet te hard staat nu. Even kijken hoe dit loopt. Slecht geluid. Ja, want bij mij thuis heb ik dat totaal niet. We hebben geen andere... Okay, well, unfortunately I have to skip this part. Good afternoon, everybody. The introduction was in Dutch. I presume everybody understands English here. Are there any members of the audience that doesn't speak or understand anything in Dutch? Oh, a couple of hands. Okay, good. Unfortunately, the audio is pretty bad. So I couldn't let you listen to a couple of excerpts or recordings of number stations, which is pretty bad because the subject that I'm going to discuss here with you is a subject that you can't read and you can't see, but you can only listen to it. And well, with the bad audio, that makes it a lot tougher. Before I begin, who am I? Professionally, I work in IT security, and I deal on a daily basis with, well, secrets, keeping things confidential data, and securing telecommunications. On a personal note, I'm always interested in secrets, other people's secrets, and which ones are more interesting than those where the stakes are the highest. Namely, of course, the intelligence agency or intelligence community. I'm also a radio amateur, non-licensed, I only listen. And this is actually a subject where those two things come together, where the background of secrecy and my interest in radios come together. Who has never heard of number stations? Just a note of that subject. Who has never heard of it? Never? You never have actually heard about such stations? You never came across some like a reference in a movie or in a series or anything like that? No? Oh, okay. Okay, so I have to tell you a little bit more then about it. Number stations are alleged radio stations, as the introduction that has been put on the promotional text says. It has been alleged to be used by the intelligence community for agents in the field, or agents more in enemy territory, to be more precise. Alleged, usually, because of a lack of evidence, and you hardly hear anything about it, so I can understand why most of you have never actually heard about these stations at all. When you read about things concerning intelligence operations, you usually hear anything about concealed cameras and dead letter boxes where people drop or give each other letters in invisible ink and such. So those are the things that are pretty common and most talked about, and this subject, strangely enough, never gets that kind of attention. Why that is, I will disclose to you later on. You should go to the other slide. Okay. Before I go to more in-depth what the implications of number stations are, I'm first going to talk to you about how it actually works, and then later on to build a case to show that it actually comes from intelligence agencies around the world. In the audio sample that I would like to hear you at the beginning, but because of the poor audio quality, you cannot really hear it or listen to it. I put some different samples in it from Chinese number stations in Mandarin Chinese, Cuban number station in Spanish, an American number station, of course, in English, and a former German number station that was used during the Cold War, and that was, of course, in German. Only to show to you that this subject is these number stations are being used all around the world. So it's not exclusively used by the Americans or only Soviet Russia back then. It is a very common mean to give someone out in the open information, usually about logistics, in a very concealed manner, where you cannot backtrace it to whoever listens to it. But before I go into that a little bit more, I would like to just talk about the very messages themselves. So how do they work? Again, that's very hard for me now for the rest of the lecture. I had in mind to refer every time I wanted to say something about these audio samples to the initial audio that you heard on the beginning. Now you haven't heard or haven't had the chance to actually listen to them. Messages, because not only are messages being dispersed over the air, but also information about for whom it is intended, and some manner of identification of the station itself. You have to keep in mind that most stations had their peak of activities during the Cold War, and especially in Europe. You had the West German intelligence agency, the Bundesnachrichtendienst, that was operating such a station. Then you also had East Germany, you had Soviet Russia, you had Great Britain. So you had lots of stations and activities on European soil. And the problem that can easily arise is that you tune in perhaps by accident to the wrong number station that is not that doesn't contain messages for you. So for that they had the use of a call sign or an interval, usually a part of some music. I don't know if I can. No, fortunately I cannot let you hear that. Little pieces of music that identify the station and also helps you tune in, because these stations are irregulated. So for example, when you are a licensed ham operator or you listen for example to radio 538, those two operators, private or commercial, they all have licenses, right? So there's a list somewhere of a regulatory body that knows who transmits on which frequencies. These number stations are unlicensed, so formally or officially speaking they don't exist. And even when you report a complaint to such a regulatory organization, usually those reports are not necessarily ignored, but there's not really much they can do, because the number stations themselves come from other countries instead of the country where most people listen to them. So again, unfortunately I cannot let you or play a sample of that. Because I'm just going to try it again. Bear with me here. Okay, so what you heard here, thank God by the way that you're all pretty much young, so you don't have any hearing problems as much as far as I know. Going to turn the audio off again. So what you heard here is a sequence of tones, and the sequence differs among different stations. You had different stations, and right thereafter you heard Hotel Kilo. So the station is calling himself HK, Hotel Kilo. You also had different stations operated by the same operator. So sometimes you heard Delta Mike or Romeo Kilo or any of that sorts. So that's only a means for an agent when they are tuning to know that they have tuned in to the right number station. And again, the tones, the little piece of music, is only for when you dial in that you can easily spot the number stations. And they usually start at a whole hour or at a half hour. So when you tune in, for example, at 1300 hours, and then you start dialing, you start to go through all the frequencies, and you hear this, then you know that you found the right number station that was intended for you. The latter part of it, this female voice, said something along the line of eine Mitteilung für. Eine Mitteilung für. Meaning a message for. And the message, these transmissions are used for a multitude of agents, usually all at once. So they had to put discrepancies in it for the agent to know which message is for him or for somebody else. And to let me see if I can. Oh, I cannot let you hear it again. She said something along the line of 328. She repeated that once, and then said 1 groups. So 11 groups. This is a mean. This is a measure to know for the recipient when he or she has received the whole message. Because the nature, of course, of shortwave radio or AM radios is it's very sensitive for interference. So what you usually have is that little bits and pieces of messages can be hard to hear because of interference, local interference or interference that has been man-made, for example a jamming station. There are also countermeasures. Other countries that don't want to, they want to disrupt these kinds of operations, usually in the Middle East. And you can hear these jamming stations occasionally, not that often. So this is a way for a recipient to know whether he or she has received the whole message. So you can see that the agent with the ID number 921 as a pretty big message. Another measure that has been put in and is used by different agencies is that this number, this agent ID, changes. So, for example, one person with an identification number of 328 may next week have a totally different number, and that's a way to avoid traffic analysis. So, when if an agent has a fixed identification number, and you listen long enough to those transmissions, you can deduce how many agents there are in the field. And with these changing identification numbers, all that goes out the window. So you don't know how many agents there are in the field, which is quite a clever manner to circumvent that. They also use 5 to 4 figure groups. This is more so because if you use bigger groups to send messages, you have a tendency to forget certain pieces, right? So if you perhaps write down a phone number or you read a phone number, it's usually split up in pieces of four digits, for example. So that's more easier to remember and easier to write down also. But these 5-digit groups are also being repeated, again also for the redundancy of because of interference, man-made interference or just accidental interference, unintended interference. Again, there was an audio. I'm going to try it again, but I don't think it's going to work. Here you have the interference. You hear twice. You hear an interference coming by, but because you hear the same 5-digit group twice, that kind of interference is not much of a problem. So that was a way to circumvent interference. You use numbers, you use random numbers. You listen to it and you try to make out what am I listening to, right? It's all pretty much random. So what is used, on the contrary to popular belief, whenever I talk about a subject, most people I talk to think that a novel is being used, right? Alice in Wonderland, and the only thing that is being sent is which page number and which sentence and then which word and such, and that's how the whole message is being made up. And that's absolutely not true. The messages are really being sent letter by letter, translated again to numbers, and then being sent. What you see here is a piece of a one-time pad, a code book, so to speak, used for a message, usually one message. So this particular slide, later on you will see that this is one slide, is good for one message. And the strength of using a one-time pad is that the code is as long as the message itself, and it's only being used once. So just by listening to it and intercepting all these messages, there is no way, because every time one message has been sent, the code book, or usually a code page, is being cut out, burned, or at least destroyed. So every code is being used only once, when used properly. There has been cases in the past where codes have been recycled, sometimes only just once, but recycling that code one time was enough to crack, or being able to crack the code, because through defectors and through spies that operate in, let's say, Soviet Russia, over time you can get more and more information about how these messages are composed and what to look for in those messages to find something that you can actually crack. So a one-time pad is actually a very useful manner. Here you see one of those earlier one-time pads, little booklet with a seal, and when you open it, it looks something like this. And here again you see those 5-digit numbers.
Peter, can you turn the audio off, please?
Oh, sorry. There you go. You can't read this when you actually have this on a one-on-one scale. You can. This is a very small slide. This is actually a slide. It isn't very noticeable when you see it like this. Here on the top, on the very top of this photo, you can actually see the same slide, and that really shows you how small these one-time pad or smaller, because the small-time pad on the lower side of the photo is one of these first code books, and later on they begin to miniaturize those code books, those one-time pads, more and more. Again, with pages to rip them out and to decipher a text. So again, as I told you, usually people assume that books, novels, are being used to send secret messages to spies in the field, and that is far from the truth. So these numbers are being sent. You write them down above or under the one-time pad, and then all you have to do is subtract or add. It differs between intelligence agency, I don't know which one did what exactly, but the Stasi and the Bundesnachrichtendienst had the exact opposite manner of decoding. So I thought it was the Stasi that you had to add, and with the Bundesnachrichtendienst, the West German intelligence agency, you had to subtract the numbers without carrying. So when you have, for example, 4 plus 8, you could say, well, that becomes 12. Well, there is no 1, so it becomes 2. And so again, you get the clear text, but then you end up with only again, numbers. And you can't read numbers. So you need something to translate the numbers to meaningful sentences, meaningful words, the actual message. And that requires a table. And again, that's the same photo again. On the right side, you have the one-time pads, and on the left side you have actually a weird square-looking table, and this is a veneer table. Veneer table being one of different kinds of tables being used to decipher, or no, not decipher, translate the numbers in clear text to actual letters that you can use. Not only a veneer table was used, all other kinds of tables were also used. This one used by, if I'm not mistaken, East Germany. And here you have a very simple, very crude table where just by adding a couple of numbers you get the certain letters. But they became more and more sophisticated. I've seen a lot of different tables, and you can really see that there's this progress going on, or during the Cold War at least. And so what you get is all those numbers, and you can then translate them to meaningful sentences. But then again, that doesn't go to show that intelligence agencies are behind it. I mean, could be pirate radio, right? Could be drug smugglers. That's one thing that I hear regularly. That there are drug smugglers using this, or that it's just some kooky pirate radio with perhaps too much money. And that's actually something that's very implausible, because these things have been going on for at least 50 years. I know that the BND, the West German intelligence agency, now, since the Cold War is over, they are the intelligence agency for the entire, for the whole of Germany, because East Germany was no longer there shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall. But the problem is not only the longevity of these activities, it's also the worldwide nature. You can everywhere where you are, where you have a shortwave radio receiver, you can pick these messages up in different languages and in different message formats. And so that tells you at least that it's not one and the same person. And another problem that also arises is that this person or this organization would be violating radio regulations all over the world, in every country where you can receive them, because it's unlicensed, and sometimes they actually do disrupt legitimate broadcasts. So there has been an account, for example, where the Air Force had trouble with communicating with one of their pilots, because suddenly a number stations came up on almost exactly the same frequency. That's all, but that's very, very sloppy, and nowadays extremely rare. So again, but I say it's no drug smugglers and no cookie, extremely rich pirate radio or radio pirate. The first quote is from a person, from a reporter from the Telegraph, and British government official, and he was asked, so what about these number stations? And the answer that he gave was so weird. If a government is not involved in number stations, that's not the kind of answer you should be giving, unless, of course, you want to arouse even more suspicion to yourself, or at least your government. So that was a quote, very well-known quote that at least raises the eyebrow, so to speak. But there is more. The beauty of a legal system is that whenever someone gets indicted and has charges against them, let's say for example, you are a spy in America, right? And you are spying on behalf of Cuba or Soviet Russia, or Russia nowadays. It's no longer Soviet. Thank God. And you are arrested. You are incarcerated. You have to phone your lawyer. They already have a case, obviously, because otherwise they wouldn't have arrested you. Those complaints have to be filed to a court, and they become court documents, and these court documents are public. So although it's a very secretive and a very clandestine activity, these number stations, you sometimes get a glimpse of them through documents that have been supplied to the courts, to a court, and because of that legal system, they become public by nature, because court documents are, unless there is some national security thing going on, that they can be exempted from that, but otherwise they are public. So these things are public, and as I said before, those number station operations have been going on since at least 50 years. There has been an account from a German shortwave radio magazine, Kurzwelle Panorama, somewhere around the early 20th century, somewhere around the First World War, that actually had an article about someone having an account hearing random numbers being spoken on a radio, on a shortwave radio. So I don't know if that's an actual spy number station or just somebody experimenting with shortwave radio. Could also very possibly be, but that was one of the first accounts to go back that far. But to come back to the secret information that has become public through the legal system, during all those years, many spies have been arrested, charged, and also been extradited or really had to serve prison time. One of them being Erwin van Haarlem. I have two names right here because this is actually the latter name is his actual name. He was what they call an illegal, so a spy posing as somebody of another nationality. Something also being used by Russia, for example. So you have Russians entering Russia, getting a false identity, a complete profile. So you have, they can tell you with a straight face where they came from, what schools they attended, what their former professional life was. Well, all that is a complete lie. It's all a fabricated identity. It's a legend, so to speak. That was in Great Britain. Then you also had the WASP network. Again, in 10 years later, 98, FBI. Then the Cuban 5, 2001. This is far when the Cold War was already over. So the Cold War was already over, and you still have these number stations that go on, that still operate, and spies being arrested while sometimes using one of those stations. So Erwin van Haarlem, for example, that was the real smoking gun. He was arrested, and when the special branch, which is like the FBI, when they entered his house, he was actually listening to a Morse code, and he wrote that down. So he had already a piece of a notepad and wrote down some numbers on it. And he was doing that right when the special branch entered his house. British account, 2 American accounts. Oh, here you see, by the way, a network. They were arrested in 98, but they were already on the case on 95. And they found a laptop, and on the laptop there was a one-time pad on it, a piece of software, and software to decode messages. And because they already got their hands on that software, they could also, and then also the one-time pad, unused one-time pads. So they can also decode future messages that were sent to those respected spies between 95 and 98, of course, because after that they were arrested. We go on more to the present. One of these spies was arrested 1 week after 9/11, almost 1 week after 9/11. And again, in the affidavit, and the affidavit is the public court document. That's a piece of proof whereby the FBI says, we have a case, and this is what we have found. This is why we think we have a case. And an excerpt of that goes slightly into one of these shortwave transmissions from Cuba. Then again, more and more spies only 2 years ago arrested, and they had spied for 30 years. 30 years, and it also goes for Ana Belén Montes. And that's also the beauty of using these number stations. Again, when you listen to a station, no matter which station that is, there is really no way to figure out that somebody is actually listening to one of those number stations. Of course, you have something, and I think I could disclose that with you, something like oscillation radiation. So when a radio is tuned into a particular frequency, it also emits on another frequency and that can be picked up by counterintelligence. But there is no way that it shows. There is no physical contact, right? So if you just go about your business and you work in the State Department and you draw no suspicion, then you can keep this up for a lot of decades, because the number stations won't give it away. You can listen to them a lot anytime you want, but you cannot figure out who's listening to them. You can figure out who is sending, which is hard with shortwave, but not impossible. But that's also not the big secret. The big secret is who's listening to those stations. Again, Myers, 2010, Russian spy ring. Almost something like 9 or 10 people were arrested. Spy swap in Switzerland, and they're now one of them is now a very big celebrity in Russia. Affidavit of the FBI stated something about radiograms, and here we have, in addition, spiral notebooks and seemingly random numbers. So that sounds very familiar. Then, besides the affidavits, we have literature. People who are no longer working in the intelligence community, they want to write something about it. You have defectors. You have all kinds of manners to get new information. Declassified documents, the Cold War is over, so some things that were used during the Cold War are no longer being used or being declassified. And let the other guy do the talking. By that I mean that goes for Germany. You have West and East Germany, right? So the Cold War is over. Soviet Russia no longer exists, and East Germany also no longer exists and becomes part of Germany, meaning that the East German Intelligence Agency no longer exists. Classified documents no longer are classified. So you gain a lot of knowledge again from the other side. Again, the end of the Cold War. Another book, good to read, interesting, nice. Nice guy, by the way, 2 guys. Another former CIA agent, but they never go into great lengths or great depth when they talk about these number stations. Here, by the way, they call it a one-way voice link. So that's the slang, so to speak, they use within the CIA when they refer to number stations. Declassified documents. This was from a Polish counterintelligence agency. This is from the Stasi, the East German intelligence agency, no longer classified. Hauptverwaltung A, that's the foreign intelligence section from within the East German intelligence agency. From 1986. Talking about für die Arbeit mit operativ-technische Mittelen, so operations for operational technical means. Going into description, that sounds and reads exactly the same like number stations, and they call it Welle 1, wave 1. Wave 1 was a one-way manner of conveying a message, and they also have a Welle 2, wave 2, which means two-way communication. Two-way communication, so not only can the agent in the field receive messages, but they can also send. They have a little transmitter on their in their house or on an undisclosed location. Here we have an inventory. The second from the right, IZSU, Internationale Zusammenwerkung Soviet Union. That's the Soviet Union. And here they go about a Sprachmorse-generator and speech Morse generator. So what's a speech Morse generator? Oh, this is, by the way, the diagram of that particular device. This is a speech Morse generator. So when you hear a voice, when you heard a voice, let me put it more precisely, when you heard a voice during the Cold War, and it was East German, most likely you heard this device. This device contains all the samples of all the numbers and other kinds of messages, and the tape was a way to put the message into the machine, into the memory of the machine. So, we've come to a conclusion. The conclusion being that they are indeed not operated by drug smugglers, or let me put it more precisely, I have never seen ever, directly or indirectly, any proof that other organizations or other entities besides the intelligence community to operate such numbers stations. But that's also because they are still being used. So when you listen nowadays, you can hear Cuba. I was tuning, I had some time left during my winter holiday, and tuned in. I was actually not looking for a number station, and I just happened to stumble upon a Cuban number station. And another station that's pretty good, strong to receive here is a Russian number station. All the other number stations are you are not able to receive them, or they are extremely faint to receive them. So you have, for example, a very famous number station that sometimes identifies itself as Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, and that's a Israeli number station. Now, as I said before, you cannot really perform radio direction finding easily. So how do I know, for example, that that's coming from Israel? Well, you still have something called like signal strength, and when I'm in North Europe, the signal strength is pretty weak and almost faint, and I can hardly hear it, only distinguish it. But when I travel, for example, to Greece, and suddenly I don't really have to go through all the trouble to hear it, and I really hear it quite strongly. Then from there on travel to Israel, not even to unfold my antenna, but I just have to turn my radio on to the right frequency, and then I hear it as strong and clear as ever can be. So that's a very strong indication that Israel is involved in it. And of course, for all the spy incidents that sometimes happen. So, thank you first and foremost for listening. Second question: are there questions? Sure, go ahead.
When these number stations meet at regular intervals, isn't it quite easy to disrupt those transmissions? Because if they only transmit at a whole or half hour, then people can just listen, and when they hear the number station go over it with more powerful.
Oh yeah, but that happens. So when you hear, for example, when you listen to one of these Israeli number stations, you can regularly hear a jamming station. And if you look on the internet, for example, on YouTube, for example, I am terribly sorry for the crappy sound we have here. Otherwise, I would have let it play it for you. Yeah, so those things happen. Yeah, some are on whole hours, on or half hours. Some are like 5 minutes later, for example. So, but the trick is, that's also the advantage and the strength of a number station. You don't know when they're going to operate. You don't know when they're going to transmit, and you also don't know which frequency. So you have like 20 to 25 megahertz to go through, and to distinguish whether it is a utilization station, like for weather information, or facts, or military. You don't know when a number station is going to pop up. I don't know that. So so sometimes when I have the time, I always listen to whole hours, half hours, and then search frequencies that have been used before. And sometimes I get lucky. Yeah. Oh, sure. Oh.
Short question, and we have time.
Oh dear.
It's a bit late. It's not a short question. Do you have time to ask it afterwards? Yeah.
Okay.
Indeed, that's if people still have questions, then.
Oh, hey, a familiar face.
Sorry. Well, if people still have questions, then I'd rather I would prefer if you would ask them afterwards, because.
Oh yeah, sure.
To go to college and that.
Oh yeah. Oh, very important.
Well,
you don't want to miss on that.
Yeah, otherwise people keep leaving the room.
Okay.
Something you'd like to have? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Peter.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I have a sec, if you can have a second, just a second.
Just
thank
one
you very
second.
much for your speech. It was very.
You're welcome.
It was very interesting because, well, we have lectures about interesting stuff, but more like research or
more relevant,
yeah,
perhaps
well,
more relevant,
well,
applicable.
Yeah, but
you can
our companies give,
put it to use.
Telling about what they do, and no circulation.
No commercial stuff this time. Sorry, yeah. No.
But thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry. And a yearbook of our student association about what we do and that sort of stuff.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Have any hands left? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If you could all take your garbage and sit down small